Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're embarking on an absolutely epic historical journey. In this explainer, we're going to unpack the fascinating, turbulent, and deeply complex story of one of history's most renowned figures and the monumental clash over one of the world's most sacred cities. We're talking about the great Sultan Salahuddin, a name that literally echoes through the centuries. We'll be using our source material to trace his rise, his defining conquests, and the staggering legacy he left behind. A legacy that, as you'll see, still dramatically shapes our world today. All right, let's dive right in.
We're starting our story right in the middle of the action. So imagine this. It's roughly 1,000 years ago, and a massive royal Muslim caravan is peacefully traveling toward Mecca. Out of nowhere, they're viciously ambushed. And the attacker isn't just some random bandit, it's a famously cruel local ruler named Reynold of Hattin. He loots their wealth, tortures the travelers, and then delivers this fatal, mocking insult to his captives, telling them to go and call upon their prophet Muhammad to save them. Now, this wasn't just a taunt, you guys, it was a devastating provocation.
Section 1. The Spark of Conflict.
This single, arrogant act of cruelty wasn't just an isolated incident. It was the match that lit a massive historical powder keg. The sheer magnitude of Reynold's mistake was that this wasn't just any ordinary caravan. As our source notes, traveling right there within this group was none other than the sister of the most powerful Muslim ruler in the world at the time, Sultan Salahuddin Ayyubi. When a battered survivor brought this news back to the royal court in Damascus, Saladin was absolutely furious. He made a solemn, unshakable vow that he would personally take righteous vengeance against Reynold and recapture the lands he had terrorized.
Section 2. Jerusalem's Sacred Early History.
To understand the true weight of Saladin's vow, we kind of have to pause and look backwards to see exactly why these lands, and particularly Jerusalem, were the ultimate prize. The source material gives us a rapid, crucial timeline to really grasp the context. Jerusalem, as you know, is sacred to three major world religions. For Muslims, its importance was cemented in the 600 CE with the Prophet Muhammad's miraculous night journey. Then in the 630s, we see something truly incredible. The second caliph, Omar, receives the surrender of Jerusalem completely peacefully. Not a single drop of blood is shed. It was entirely bloodless. The 690s then bring immense development, like the magnificent Dome of the Rock. But by the 1000s, this once unified Islamic Golden Age fractures into fragmented, competing empires, leaving the entire region highly vulnerable.
Section 3. The First Crusades' devastation.
That vulnerability in the 1000s completely sets the stage for a dramatic shift in tone. You see, the fragmented Muslim empires were totally unprepared for what was gathering far to the west. Over in Europe, Pope Urban II gave a speech that literally altered the course of history. He promised that whoever fought in this new holy war to take Jerusalem would have all their sins forgiven and go to heaven. And this sparked an absolute frenzy. First, a disorganized army of peasants with pitchforks arrived, and they were quickly defeated. But the following year, a highly organized, heavily armed force of over 100,000 crusaders marched relentlessly toward the Holy Land.
What happened next was a horrifying tragedy. In 1099 AD, the Crusaders breached Jerusalem, and according to both Islamic and Christian historical accounts cited in our source, the ensuing massacre was unprecedented. Up to 100,000 Muslims were killed. Jewish residents seeking refuge in their temple were burned alive. The accounts actually describe blood literally flowing up to the knees of the conquerors. This stark, terrifying brutality is a direct, heartbreaking contrast to Caliph Umar's peaceful conquest just 4 centuries earlier.
Section 4. The Rise of Saladin.
The fall of Jerusalem completely traumatized the Muslim world. They were divided, fighting amongst themselves, and desperate for a unifying champion to emerge from the chaos. But rising to that position, incredibly dangerous. Before he could even think about facing the Crusaders, Salahuddin had to survive extreme internal political chaos, heavily fueled by a group known as the Al-Hashashin, the original assassins. This was a secretive cult of hashish-using, highly trained hitmen who terrorized Muslim leadership, violently silencing anyone who tried to unite the empire. They even infiltrated Salahuddin's own camp and nearly killed him in his sleep.
Despite these terrors, Salahuddin not only survived, he thrived. He was trained by his brilliant uncle in Egypt and steadily gained power. When the ruling sultan died, leaving a massive power vacuum, Salahuddin marched on the capital, Damascus. And this right here brilliantly illustrates his leadership. He didn't sack the city. The people actually opened the gates for him. He took control and unified the fragmented empire without shedding a single drop of blood, becoming the undisputed sultan.
Section 5. The Conquest of Jerusalem.
With the Muslim world finally united behind him, Saladin was ready to fulfill his vow.
And it all comes back to that initial insult by Reynaud. Saladin knew the Crusader army was heavily armored but lacked discipline. So, when they marched out to meet him in the scorching July heat at the Battle of Hattin, Saladin executed a masterclass in military tactics. Step 1, he blocked their access to the only nearby water source. Step 2, he lured them deeper into the blistering desert. And Step 3, once they were utterly exhausted, dehydrated, and desperate, his forces surrounded them. It was a complete tactical victory.
The Crusader army was completely decimated, and both the Crusader king and the cruel Reynaud were captured. Saladin brings them to his tent. He offers water to the king, which is a traditional symbol of royal protection. But when the king passes that water to Reynaud, Saladin stops him. He reminds Reynaud of his mockery of the Prophet Muhammad, draws his sword, and fulfills his vow by executing him. Yet, adhering strictly to the honorable customs of the time, he completely spares the Crusader king.
Following this huge victory, Saladin marches directly on Jerusalem. After a brief siege, the city surrenders. Now, remember, back in 1099, the Crusader conquest had resulted in the utter massacre of 100,000 Muslims and Jews. But in 1187, when Saladin recaptures it, what does he do? He grants widespread amnesty. He ensures safe passage. He literally pays the ransoms of the poor from his very own royal treasury.
The anecdotes of his mercy are just staggering. He forgave the Christians who had occupied the city. He waived the ransom fees for all elders and children, letting them go for free. When his generals brought him young men who couldn't afford to buy their freedom, he went right into his own tent, brought out his personal gold, and bought their freedom himself. He even decreed that the city's doors would remain open for future peaceful Christian pilgrimages. This incredible nobility made him an enduring hero, not just in the Islamic world, but famously among European Christians as well.
After successfully defending the city from a massive European counterattack led by Richard the Lionheart, Salahuddin's time finally came to an end. The Sultan passed away, and incredibly, the man who ruled the most powerful empire on earth died with only a few silver and gold coins to his name. He had literally given all of his vast wealth away to his people.
Section 6. Modern Echoes and Legacy.
The source material draws a direct, really fascinating line from these ancient sands to the geopolitics of our modern era. You see, for over 700 years after Salahuddin, the region remained under Muslim control, eventually falling under the vast Ottoman Empire. But the 20th century completely reshaped the map. Following World War I in the 1910s, the Ottoman Empire fell. The British Empire then took control of the territory in the 1920s. And then in the 1940s, the political landscape fundamentally shifted once again with the creation of the State of Israel, ending centuries of contiguous Muslim governance in the territory.
The source material highlights how deeply these historical events still resonate today and the incredibly long memories involved here. It notes a famously reported anecdote from the early 20th century where a Western general, upon entering Damascus, allegedly approached Saladin's tomb, kicked it, and declared, "Saladin, we are back." It really vividly illustrates how the Crusader narrative survived well into modern colonial times.
Furthermore, the source points out how this ancient vocabulary continues to surface in modern global conflicts. It highlights the early 2000s, when Western military campaigns in the Middle East were launched. Specifically, it notes how U.S. President George W. Bush initially used the historically charged word crusade to describe the war on terrorism, a term that immediately echoed back 1,000 years to the very conflicts Saladin fought.
Which brings us to the final thought presented by our source material. It points out a fascinating historical rhythm. The Crusaders held Jerusalem for almost 90 years before Saladin emerged to unify a fragmented people and reclaim it. Today, it has been roughly 80 years since control of the region shifted once again in the modern era. The source leaves us with a profound, lingering question. In a region defined by ancient claims and cyclical struggles, is history destined to repeat itself? Are we waiting to see if a new unifying figure will emerge in our lifetimes? Thank you so much for exploring this historical narrative with me today. It certainly leaves us with a lot to think about.